The whispers followed Zara Whitfield everywhere in the small town of Copper Creek, Colorado, in 1876, whispers that stung like the harsh prairie winds. "Too plain for marriage," they said. "Not enough to keep a man," they muttered. But Zara had never expected her own father would believe them too. She stood frozen, clutching the small carpet bag containing the few possessions she'd been allowed to take. The stagecoach waited behind her, ready to carry her away from the only home she'd ever known. "You're a burden to this family," her father had declared that morning. 22 years old and not a single proper suitor. "Your sisters are all married with children. You'll go to my cousin in Denver. Perhaps there you can find work as a governess or seamstress." Her mother had merely looked away, unwilling to challenge her husband's decision. The driver called for final boarding. Tears blurred Zara's vision as she climbed aboard, not daring to look back at the town that had rejected her for nothing more than her ordinary appearance. Her chestnut hair lacked luster, her figure was unremarkable, her face pleasant but unmemorable. In a town where beauty was currency for a good marriage, Zara had been deemed worthless. The stagecoach lurched forward, beginning the journey that would take her far from everything she knew. What Zara couldn't know was that fate had other plans that would begin when the stagecoach wheels splintered 30 miles outside a small outpost called Raven's Gulch. "Everybody out," the driver shouted after the violent crash. "We're stranded here till help comes." Zara stumbled from the damaged coach, her ankle twisting painfully as she landed on the dusty ground. The vast expanse of the frontier stretched in every direction, beautiful, terrifying, and completely indifferent to her plight. "The next settlement's 5 miles north," the driver announced to the 3 passengers. "I'll stay with the coach and the mail. The rest of you best start walking before nightfall." The other 2 passengers, a salesman and an elderly woman, exchanged worried glances. "I cannot possibly walk that far," the elderly woman lamented. The salesman tipped his hat. "I'll escort this lady. Miss, will you join us?" Zara winced as she put weight on her injured ankle. "I'll follow behind, don't wait for me." As the others departed, Zara gathered her belongings and began the slow, painful journey northward. With each step, the pain intensified. After less than a mile, she collapsed beneath the shade of a lone cottonwood tree, the afternoon sun beating down mercilessly. "This is how I die," she whispered to the empty landscape. Unwanted and alone. She must have fallen asleep because the next thing she knew, the sun was lower in the sky and the sound of hoofbeats approached. Zara struggled to sit upright, fear gripping her heart. Bandits were common in these parts, and a woman alone made for easy prey. Instead, a single rider appeared, silhouetted against the golden light of the setting sun. As he drew closer, she could make out a broad-shouldered man atop a magnificent chestnut stallion. His face was obscured by the wide brim of his hat, but she could tell he was young, perhaps in his late 20s. "Madam," he called, pulling his horse to a stop. "You all right?" Zara struggled to find her voice. "The stagecoach, it broke down miles back." He dismounted in one fluid motion, revealing his full height. He stood well over 6 feet tall, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a summer storm. He approached cautiously, as if afraid of frightening her. "I'm Garrett Evans," he said, removing his hat. "I run cattle at the Double E Ranch north of here." "Zara Whitfield," she replied, wincing as she tried to stand. His eyes, keen as a hawk's, noticed her pain immediately. "You're hurt." "It's just my ankle, I'll be fine." Without warning, he knelt before her, gently examining her swollen ankle. His touch was surprisingly delicate for hands so weathered by work. "It's not broken, but you won't be walking on it." He looked up at her, and for the first time in her life, Zara felt truly seen. Not judged, not dismissed, but seen. "I can't impose, Miss Whitfield," he interrupted with a hint of a smile. "Out here, we don't leave folks stranded. That's not the Western way." Before she could protest further, he'd helped her to her feet, collected her carpetbag, and was assisting her toward his horse. "I've never ridden before," she admitted. Garrett laughed, a rich sound that seemed to warm the cooling evening air. Then today's full of new experiences for you. With surprising strength, he lifted her onto the saddle before swinging up behind her. One arm encircled her waist, holding her securely as the horse began to move. Zara sat rigid, acutely aware of the impropriety of their position and equally aware that she had no other options. "Relax," he said, his voice close to her ear. "Copper won't let you fall." The horse moved at a steady pace across the terrain as the sky painted itself in brilliant oranges and purples. Despite her circumstances, Zara couldn't help but marvel at the wild beauty surrounding them. "Where were you headed?" Garrett asked after they'd ridden in silence for some time. "Denver," she answered simply, unwilling to share the humiliation of her banishment. "Denver's a far piece from here. You have family there, a distant cousin. I'm to find work there." He seemed to sense her reluctance to elaborate. "Well, Raven's Gulch isn't much, but we've got a doctor who can look at that ankle, and the widow Bennett runs a clean boarding house." As they crested a hill, Zara saw lights twinkling in the distance, the small settlement of Raven's Gulch. It was hardly more than a main street with a scattering of buildings. But at that moment, it looked like salvation. Dr. Samuel Foster was a kind-faced man in his 50s who examined Zara's ankle with professional detachment, while Garrett waited outside. The doctor's wife, Martha, clucked sympathetically as she helped Zara remove her boot. "A bad sprain," the doctor pronounced. "You'll need to stay off it for at least a week, preferably 2. Zara's heart sank. "I can't possibly. I need to get to Denver." "Denver will still be there in 2 weeks, young lady," Martha Foster said firmly. "Your health comes first." When Garrett was allowed back in, the doctor explained the situation. Without hesitation, Garrett said, "I'll take her to Mrs. Bennett's. She'll have a room there until she's healed." "That's very kind, Mr. Evans, but I have limited funds," Zara protested. "Mrs. Bennett always needs help with the mending," Martha suggested. "You can work for your keep, dear." Before Zara could argue further, Garrett had already agreed to the arrangement. Within the hour, she found herself installed in a small but clean room at the widow Bennett's boarding house, her ankle bandaged and elevated on pillows. Mrs. Bennett was a stout, energetic woman in her 60s with shrewd eyes and a no-nonsense manner. "Garrett Evans vouching for you is good enough for me," she declared. "That young man's the most respected rancher in these parts despite his youth." After the older woman left, Zara sat alone in the unfamiliar room, trying to make sense of the day's events. She had been cast out by her family, survived a stagecoach accident, and been rescued by a handsome stranger all before sunset. For someone whose life had been utterly predictable until now, the suddenness of these changes was overwhelming. Morning brought a knock at her door. Mrs. Bennett entered with a breakfast tray, followed by Garrett Evans. He'd exchanged his dusty riding clothes for clean ones, though he still wore the same worn leather boots. "Mr. Evans has come to check on you," Mrs. Bennett announced, setting down the tray. "I'll leave you two to talk." Zara smoothed her hair self-consciously, aware that she must look a fright after yesterday's ordeal. "How's the ankle?" Garrett asked, remaining standing near the door. "Better, thank you, and thank you for your help yesterday. I don't know what would have become of me if you hadn't come along." He shrugged, seemingly uncomfortable with her gratitude. "Like I said, it's the way things are done out here." He hesitated, then added, "I've sent word to the stage company about the accident. They'll arrange transport to Denver once you're healed." Something about his businesslike tone disappointed her, though she couldn't say why. "That's very thoughtful." An awkward silence fell between them. Finally, he said, "Mrs. Bennett mentioned you might help with some mending. I've got a stack of shirts that could use attention if you're willing." Zara nodded, grateful for the opportunity to earn her keep. "I'd be happy to. I'll bring them by tomorrow then." He turned to leave, then paused. "Miss Whitfield?" "Yes, Mr. Evans. Welcome to Raven's Gulch." With that, he was gone, leaving Zara to wonder about the enigmatic cattleman who had rescued her. The days that followed fell into a surprisingly comfortable routine. True to his word, Garrett brought shirts needing repair, and Zara spent her days sitting by the window in Mrs. Bennet's parlor, mending clothes for both the widow's boarders and various townspeople who heard of her skill with a needle. Mrs. Bennet proved to be a talkative companion, filling Zara in on the settlement's history and inhabitants, particularly Garrett Evans. "That boy came here when he was just 18, she explained as they shelled peas together. "Inherited the ranch from an uncle he barely knew. Most thought he'd sell it and head back east, but he stayed and built it into the finest spread in the territory. He seems capable," Zara offered, not wanting to reveal her growing interest in the rancher. Mrs. Bennet snorted. "Capable doesn't begin to cover it. Every unmarried woman for 50 miles has set her cap for him, but he pays them no mind. Too busy with his cattle, he says." Zara tried to ignore the flutter of relief she felt at this news. What did it matter to her if Garrett Evans was married or not? In less than 2 weeks, she'd be on her way to Denver, and this brief interlude would be nothing but a memory. Yet each day, Garrett found reasons to visit the boarding house. He brought mending, delivered messages from Dr. Foster, and once arrived with a book of poetry he thought she might enjoy during her convalescence. Their conversations grew longer, ranging from books they'd read to their differing experiences of life. Zara found herself sharing things she'd never told anyone about, growing up overshadowed by her beautiful sisters, about her love of reading that her father considered frivolous, about her secret dreams of adventure that proper young ladies weren't supposed to have. "Why Denver?" Garrett asked one afternoon as they sat on Mrs. Bennet's porch. "If you could go anywhere, where would it be?" Zara considered the question. "Somewhere I could start fresh, somewhere people wouldn't look at me and see only what I lack." "And what do you think you lack?" His gray eyes were intense, focused entirely on her. She looked away, uncomfortable with his directness. "Beauty, grace, charm, all the things that make a woman desirable." Garrett's jaw tightened. "Whoever told you that was blind?" Before Zara could respond, Mrs. Bennet called her inside to help with dinner, leaving her to wonder exactly what Garrett had meant. As her ankle healed, Zara ventured outside more frequently, gradually exploring the small settlement. Raven's Gulch consisted of one main street with a general store, a small bank, the doctor's office, a saloon, and a handful of other businesses. Beyond the town limits lay scattered homesteads and ranches, the largest of which was Garrett's E. On a particularly fine spring morning, Zara sat on a bench outside the general store, enjoying the sunshine while waiting for Mrs. Bennet to finish her shopping. She overheard 2 women talking nearby, unaware of her presence around the corner. Evans was in town again this morning. "Third time this week," one said. "He's never in town this much unless it's roundup time," the other replied. "Millie says he's sweet on that plain Jane staying at Bennett's. But she's nothing special to look at. Half the girls in the county would jump at the chance to marry him. Men are strange creatures. Maybe he likes that she doesn't fuss over him like the others." Zara's cheeks burned with humiliation. The same whispers that had followed her in Copper Creek had found her here. She slipped away before the women could discover her, limping back to the boarding house despite her still tender ankle. That evening, when Garrett arrived for his now customary visit, Zara claimed a headache and remained in her room. She did the same the next day and the day after. If Garrett was merely being kind to her out of pity, she wanted no part of it. She'd had enough pity to last a lifetime. On the 4th day, Mrs. Bennet knocked on her door, her expression stern. "That poor man has come by every day, and you're breaking his heart with this foolishness." "What foolishness?" Zara asked, genuinely confused. "He's waiting downstairs. Says he won't leave until he speaks with you." Mrs. Bennet crossed her arms. "Whatever's happened between you two, at least have the courtesy to face him." Reluctantly, Zara made her way downstairs. Garrett stood by the window, his hat in his hands, turning it nervously. When he saw her, relief washed over his features. "You're all right," he said. "I was worried when you wouldn't see me." "I'm fine," she replied stiffly. "My ankle is nearly healed. I expect I'll be leaving for Denver soon." His expression fell. "I see." He set his hat on a nearby table and stepped closer. "Have I offended you somehow?" Zara couldn't meet his eyes. "No, you've been very kind." "Then why the sudden change?" I thought we were becoming friends. I overheard some ladies in town. They seemed to think that you had some kind of interest in me." She forced herself to look at him. "I don't need your pity, Mr. Evans." Confusion crossed his face, followed by understanding. "Pity? Is that what you think this is? What else could it be?" The successful rancher paying attention to the plain, penniless girl? It's the talk of the town. Garrett ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "I don't give a damn what the town thinks. And if you believe I'm the kind of man who would court a woman out of pity, then you don't know me at all." The vehemence in his voice startled her. "Then why? Why spend time with me when you could have any woman in the county?" "Because none of them are you," he exclaimed. "None of them see the world the way you do, or laugh at the things that amuse you, or have your courage." "Courage," she echoed. "It takes courage to start over with nothing, to face each day knowing you have only yourself to rely on." He took another step toward her. "From the moment I found you under that tree, I knew you were different. You weren't looking for someone to rescue you, you were ready to rescue yourself." Zara's heart hammered in her chest. "I don't understand." Garrett took her hands in his. "Then let me make it plain. I'm in love with you, Zara Whitfield. Not out of pity, not out of some misguided chivalry. I love your mind, your spirit, your heart. And yes, I even love the way you look, especially when you're concentrating on your sewing and you get that little furrow between your eyebrows." Zara couldn't believe what she was hearing. No one had ever spoken to her this way, as if she were precious, special, worthy of love. "You barely know me," she whispered. "I know enough," he replied. "I know I want the chance to know more. I'm not asking you to marry me today, though I hope one day you'll consider it. I'm asking you not to leave, not yet. Give Raven's Gulch a chance. Give us a chance." Hope, fragile as spun glass, bloomed in Zara's heart. "And if I stay, what then?" "Then we court properly. I take you to church socials and town dances. I bring you flowers and steal kisses when Mrs. Bennet isn't looking." His eyes crinkled with a smile. "We find out if what I feel, what I hope we both feel, is strong enough to build a life on." Tears welled in Zara's eyes. "My own father sent me away because I wasn't pretty enough to find a husband." Anger flashed across Garrett's face. "Then he's a fool who couldn't see the treasure right in front of him." He reached up to brush away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. "You're beautiful to me, Zara, not because of some fleeting prettiness that fades, but because of who you are." In that moment, looking into his eyes, Zara believed him. For the first time in her life, she felt beautiful, valued, cherished. "I'll stay," she whispered, "at least for a while." The smile that lit his face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "That's all I ask, for now." True to his word, Garrett courted her properly. He escorted her to church each Sunday, sat beside her at community gatherings, and brought her wildflowers gathered from the prairie. As her ankle fully healed, he taught her to ride, his hands steady and sure as he guided her. The townsfolk soon grew accustomed to seeing them together. If some still wondered what the handsome rancher saw in the ordinary-looking newcomer, they kept their thoughts to themselves. It was hard to maintain such skepticism in the face of Garrett's obvious devotion and Zara's blossoming confidence. Zara took a job at the general store, using her skill with numbers to help the aging proprietor keep his books. The position provided her with income and independence, and the knowledge that if she stayed in Raven's Gulch, it would be by choice, not necessity. Summer arrived, bringing with it cattle drives and long days when Garrett was away at the ranch. During one such absence, Zara received a letter from her younger sister, Emma. "Father is furious," Emma wrote. "He expected you to remain with Cousin Margaret indefinitely, but she wrote saying you never arrived. The entire family is in an uproar. Where are you? Are you safe? Please write back so I can assure Mother you're alive at least." Zara sat for a long time with the letter in her hands, unsure how to respond. Her family had cast her out, deemed her unworthy, yet now they claimed concern for her welfare. Part of her wanted to ignore the letter entirely to cut all ties with her past. But another part recognized that whatever her father's failings, her mother and sisters didn't deserve to worry. When Garrett returned from the ranch that weekend, she showed him the letter. "What will you tell them?" He asked after reading it. "I don't know," she admitted. "Part of me wants to write that I'm perfectly fine without them, that I've found a place where I'm valued for who I am, not what I look like." Garrett nodded thoughtfully. "And the other part?" "The other part knows that would only hurt my mother and sisters, who had no choice in father's decision." She sighed. "I could simply tell them I'm safe and well without details. Or," Garrett suggested, taking her hands in his, "you could tell them you've met someone. Someone who sees you clearly and loves what he sees." Zara's heart skipped. Though they had been courting for months, and though his feelings were clear in every look and touch, Garrett had been careful not to pressure her with declarations of love since that first emotional confrontation. "Is that true?" she asked softly. "Do you love what you see when you look at me?" "More each day," he answered without hesitation. "I love your kindness to old Mr. Peterson at the store. I love your patience with the Bennett children when they interrupt our walks. I love your courage in building a new life. Most of all, I love the way you've started to see yourself not through your father's critical eyes, but through your own." Tears welled in Zara's eyes. "I never thought anyone would look at me and see something worthwhile." "Zara," he said, his voice husky with emotion, "when I look at you, I see my future. I see the woman I want beside me for all my days." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "I see my queen." He opened the box to reveal a delicate gold ring set with a small but perfect diamond. "I'm not a poet or a scholar. I'm just a man who loves you and wants to spend his life showing you how beautiful you truly are inside and out. Will you marry me, Zara?" Through her tears, Zara saw not the plain girl her father had dismissed, but the woman Garrett Evans loved, strong, worthy, beautiful in her own way. She saw the life they could build together, based not on fleeting beauty but on genuine love and respect. "Yes," she answered, her voice steady despite her tears. "Yes, I will marry you." The wedding took place in October, when the aspens turned gold and the air held the first hint of winter's approach. The entire settlement turned out for the celebration, the church overflowing with well-wishers. Mrs. Bennett wept openly, declaring that she'd known from the first day that they were meant for each other. Zara wore a gown of ivory satin that Mrs. Foster had helped her make, her hair adorned with wildflowers. When she walked down the aisle, Garrett's face lit with such joy and pride that no one present could doubt his love. After exchanging their vows, they rode together to the Double E Ranch, now their home. Garrett had expanded the ranch house, adding a bright kitchen with windows that looked out over the rolling prairie and a small study lined with bookshelves for Zara's growing collection. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, Garrett took her hand in his. "Happy?" he asked. Zara smiled, thinking of how far she had come from that day her father had banished her for being too plain to marry. "Completely." "I was thinking," he said, his thumb tracing circles on her palm, "that we might visit your family next spring. Show them what they missed by judging you so harshly." Zara considered the suggestion. In the months since receiving her sister's letter, she had maintained a careful correspondence with Emma, sharing limited details of her new life. She had not, however, extended forgiveness to her father. "Would you want to?" Garrett pressed gently. "Not for him, but for your mother and sisters." "And perhaps to show him he was wrong," she finished for him. The idea held a certain appeal, returning not as the shameful spinster daughter but as the beloved wife of a successful rancher. "Only if you want to," Garrett assured her. "Your happiness is what matters to me." Zara leaned against his shoulder, watching as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. "I think I would like that. Not out of bitterness or revenge, but to show my sisters that there's more to a woman's worth than what others see on the surface." "That's my wise wife," Garrett said, dropping a kiss on the top of her head, "always thinking of others." "Not always," she replied with a smile. "Right now, I'm thinking only of us and the life we're building." She turned to face him, her heart full of a joy she'd never imagined possible. "I never dreamed I could be this happy." "Get used to it," he said, drawing her into his arms. "I plan to spend the rest of our lives making sure you know exactly how precious you are to me." As the stars came out in full brilliance above the Colorado prairie, Zara thought of the long journey that had brought her here, from rejection to rescue, from self-doubt to self-acceptance, from loneliness to love. The plain girl who wasn't enough had found a man who thought she was everything. "My queen," Garrett whispered against her hair, echoing the words he'd spoken when he proposed. In his eyes, in his heart, that was exactly what she was, not because of any conventional beauty, but because of the person she was beneath the surface. And in loving her, he had taught her to see that beauty in herself. The story of the plain girl and the cowboy who called her his queen spread throughout the territory. Some said it was just a romantic tale, embellished with each telling. But in Raven's Gulch, where people had witnessed the transformation of Zara Whitfield from a wounded, cast-off daughter to a confident, radiant woman, they knew the truth. That real beauty emerges when we are truly loved for who we are. And in the years that followed, as Garrett and Zara built their life together at the Double E Ranch, raising children, weathering droughts and harsh winters, celebrating bountiful years, the truth of their story only deepened. The love that had begun when a banished woman was rescued by a kind-hearted cowboy flourished into one of the great romances of Raven's Gulch, proving that the most beautiful stories often begin in the most unexpected ways.